Morning, friends. I know when Sylvia's voice goes through the room that everyone stops.
Everyone knows to stop.
Yes.
I have the loud voice.
It is really good to see you all here. I'm really glad that you all chose to come back for round 2 of our training. And we're going to be taking what we started from last time around and building on that. There's a few folks here who were not here at that first session. Don't worry, we'll be fine. But I'm really excited about what we're going to learn and the opportunity to take what we're learning about and figuring out how it's going to apply in our settings. You'll notice that we've seated you in some groups. We may move you around as the day goes on, but we've started in kind of some geographical affinity groups because we're going to start by talking about geography. And so we've got a group for churches that are more or less rural, a group for churches that are more or less small town, and a group for churches that are more or less urban. And if you're wondering why you're in your group, I can tell you later. But we're going to have some conversation around these tables and then maybe moving after lunch. So no worries if you don't like the person you sit next to. You're okay unless you're married to them. All right, let's have a word of prayer. Gracious and loving God who is incarnate in our world, God who came down and entered into our geographies, God who came near to us and understands all that we've been through. We are so thankful for this morning and this opportunity, and we just trust, Lord, that you're going to speak to us, help us to see a little bit more how we can truly follow after your footsteps and be incarnate in our communities, to listen, to learn, to grow, to truly be part of what you're doing. We thank you for this time. We pray, God, that you would give us ears open and hearts open, and that you would show us what you're doing and how we can be a part of it. We pray for the United Methodist Church as a whole this morning. We pray, God, for your Spirit to be at work, calling us to be about your business, refining and shaping and molding us as your people. We pray all this in the name of Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Well, I'd like to invite Wendy to come on up. Y'all give her a hand. Clearly, I don't know where we're starting today. So
I'd like to actually get a show of hands of who was not here last time. Okay, now those of you who were not here, I'm going to put you on the spot. Did everybody watch the video? No? No. Okay, so I just want to know how fast to go through the recap. So if I get to a part and it doesn't make any sense at all, just ask a question. So what we talked about last time is really thinking about a couple of different shifts. And we started out by reflecting on this sharing from Martin Luther King, and thinking about the goal. Why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? And he states the goal is to create a beloved community. And this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. If we want to embrace communities in a whole new way, something's got to change. And as we thought about that, we looked at some of the evidence that's been out there for a number of years. So all of these books came out 2010, 2011 time period. And just we did this last time, just a quick show of hands. How many of you guys have read at least one of these books? So a lot of congregations, a lot of pastors, these were written for church communities. A lot of churches read one or more of these books. They did Bible studies. They got their people really thinking about these things. And basically what happened was the church went, we're doing it all wrong! And so congregations kind of were frozen. Because no one wants to do harm And everyone is looking for a way of shifting so that we move out of this stuck place that we've been in. And so we developed mission shift training, which is this training, to help congregations reframe some of what you're doing. And it's not that what you're doing is bad, it's that you can go deeper. You can shift what you're already doing towards something that is more equitable, more honoring of the dignity of the friends that you've gotten to know, which is what you would love to do. With a little help, we're going to get there today. So this is some of the evidence we looked at last time. I shared a couple of stories. So I started out working with individuals experiencing homelessness. I did not set out to start the largest furniture bank on the Eastern Seaboard. I set out to help my friends who had experienced homelessness give back. And what that turned into is what is now the Caritas Furniture Bank in Richmond. And I spun that off in 2008 because what I saw was a revolving door of people coming, receiving assistance, going back into homeless services, coming back, getting assistance, going back into homeless services. And if you've done relief-based work, you've seen that. If you have a food pantry, you're going to see the same faces. And I began to get frustrated that we really weren't changing the core problem. We were meeting a need, but we really weren't changing a system. So we started doing community development in Hillside Court. And that's where a lot of my stories come from. I spent 5 years in Hillside Court, and we ended up with 9 resident-led initiatives with the neighbors leading things that they wanted to do, and I was hooked. That's what the goal is that you give it away. You build the capacity inside the neighborhood so that the neighbors become the ministers to one another. And your role is really connector, putting all those pieces together. And we spent the last 5 years in the Brooklyn Park community. Now this community is a RRHA public housing complex, very concentrated poverty. Brooklyn Park area is a neighborhood, single family residence, older neighborhood, experiencing revitalization / gentrification. They're not the same thing, but they get a little mixed up in Richmond about which is which. So that's where I live. And that neighborhood has been going through a lot of transition. So a number of my stories come from there. Then I wrote a book in 2010 called From Sanctuary to the Streets, and I started doing training of churches. Yay! Yay, there's the book. So I started training congregations in how to do this, and that is where I met Audrey and Sylvia. Oh, we did let her sit at a table. Audrey and Sylvia and a number of other congregations started doing this work. And what we've learned a lot about the importance of networks, and that one individual congregation taking on the revitalization of an entire neighborhood, it can be hard. And so part of what we're doing today is going to be shuffling you guys around in different ways of thinking about how you can support one another, and how there may be a development effort that's taking off. I know Greenlee, so Chester UMC, and we're going to meet someone from the Y later today. They may be 2 steps ahead of what's going to be happening potentially in Petersburg. And so you can share ideas and learn from one another. The reason why you're in these particular tables, as Andrew said, is the context in which you're likely to be organizing it is very different. So Greenlee has, 500 plus households in a very small, compact area. My new friend, Brian here has got 3 churches in the middle of nowhere, so really different contexts. And how Brian thinks about organizing is going to have to be slightly different than the way we think about it in Chester. And so that's why we're starting off in these groups. We talked about looking and discovering where is Jesus already at work. And that doesn't matter whether you are in the middle of nowhere or you're in the middle of Richmond. The Spirit is at work in all of these neighborhoods.
Amen.
And when we were here last time, someone said, well, what about, a guy, he's strung out on drugs, I can't seem to reach him. We're not starting there. We're starting where we see the Spirit already moving and trusting that through networks, through people getting to know each other, we are going to have an impact on the whole. But you start with your strongest places, in those places where the Spirit's already at work. So our core belief is empowered communities are strong communities. So the more resources we're mining out of the community, the stronger it's going to be. We went through this tool. Y'all remember the fishing pond? And the whole idea behind the fishing pond is to visually see everything that your congregation is potentially involved in. And generally what will happen, and what happened in this room last time, is that congregations tend to have a huge percentage. I haven't done a statistical analysis, but my years of doing this, at least 80% of what's happening in our churches is in the giving out of fish. We talked about this vocational piece. When I go to nonprofits, and I'm working with the nonprofit sector or Department of Social Services, about 80% of what they're doing is up here in the vocational needs. Because people think about poverty and they think that answer is a job. It's so much bigger than that. So we have this kind of covered in that nonprofit sector, and then thinking about environmental and what our neighborhoods look like, and do we have graffiti all over the place and kind of the broken window theory. That really is our civic associations. About 80 to 90% of what our civic associations are doing is thinking about the aesthetics of our communities. But no one, very, very few people are getting down below the surface line. And we talked about how these are things you can see, you can touch. They're very tangible, measurable kinds of things. And that most of our energy is flowing, but that those are the symptoms. The trash all over Brooklyn Park Boulevard is a symptom of disinvestment, of lack of ownership. And it doesn't matter how many times an outside group comes in and picks up that trash. If the inside keeps dumping the trash, it's not making a difference. And so we have to shift to these lower parts of that pond and start thinking about social emotional needs, need for power and control, and that opportunity for collective voice. And last time we talked about the way you start to make that shift is really recognizing the spiritual needs of community. And when we think about spiritual needs in this context, we're using that language very broadly. I want you to think about things of hope, identity. I was talking to Michael about the core of his weightlifting, helping people discover who they are. That is a spiritual question. And if we're ignoring that, none of the other stuff works. And so we're going to get a little deeper into that today when we're thinking about helping people find their core identity. We use this tool to really think about this idea of witness. So who remembers there's a married couple. Were y'all here last time? Okay, can y'all stand up? We're going to test your memory. Do you remember how to demonstrate one way of giving? A giver and a receiver. Which is which? One way of giving. One way of giving. Which is the receiver and which is the giver? Yes, very good, very good. Okay, now, mutual interdependence. Everyone's a giver, everyone's a receiver. Yay! So as we think about this, what you're looking for is mutuality. Everybody's giving something. Everyone is a receiver. And how hard that is for people who are used to being givers. It's very hard for us to accept the gifts of others. And it's hard for folks who aren't invited to give their gifts to find their place. And so we'll be talking more about how do we invite people to be in that giver role. Your homework assignment, yay! If everybody can get your homework assignment out. Andrew's going to come by and grade it.
My dog ate mine.
So what we're going to do is get in our tables. And Andrew is going to facilitate this table. I'm going to facilitate this table, and Audrey's going to facilitate the back table. And these are our questions based on what you learned from your ministry assessment. Got Brian, Brian's in the
I'm wearing two hats today, so let me keep typing this in here. And then did you all have a chance to look at this ahead of time? I know some of you who were here got it. Some of you, I emailed it out yesterday if I had your email address. But I suspect that means maybe half of us had a chance to think about it. Okay, so let's do this for a second before we discuss. Why don't you think about, and you don't need to think about everything going on in your church, but think about 3 or 4 ministries, things you can do to reach out to your community. And just figure out which category they're doing. Are they within ministries? Are you meeting a need? Are they individual betterment? Are you helping people to improve themselves, or are you helping the community? And then, are they for? Are they things you're giving to someone else? Or are they with? Are they things that kind of have a give and take? So just jot down real quick in each category. The 3 or 4 ministries that you can think about top of your head. Just start where they are, and we'll talk about it in just a moment.
Okay, all right. Same church? Okay, I didn't know if there were 4 churches between these 2
All right, one quick last question, just a number. Scale of 1 to 10, this is the highest one. How close is it?
So, I'm going to bring everybody back.
3. Okay.
It's going to be a little bit of Tom's story this year. One story. I got a plan. God has a plan. Well, I do try to listen.
Right.
All right. So, as we think about these questions, if we can get everybody, you ran them off, Ian, what'd you do? Like, you're not ready? Out of here. Is that what you did to the 14? And I feel sorry for table 3 because you're like 3 times as big, but that's how we had the hardest time. Andrew and I had a lovely breakfast at Panera, and we shuffled you guys around here which way. It didn't get to try to get it even, but as you worked through that, I'm curious to know, I think that readiness question is really, really an important one. So when you guys listen, so I'm going to look at Audrey and Andrew as you listen, where were the places in the ministry assessment where your friends at your table found entry points? around that they were already doing? What were kind of some of the things that might be good entry points to doing witness?
It would be Michael and the cooperative parish and some of the things they're doing in Washington Street.
One
United Methodist. Jerry was telling us about the Fire United Methodist and how they're starting to, they're in the community, helping people in the community, so they have community connections now.
And is
that
that
might
feeding
lead to
programs or education
No, you can
programs?
speak of it, Jerry, how they're helping.
We came up with a weekly call Mission Possible to get eggs out of the building.
Okay,
So we sent a team to a riding stable where they help autistic people ride horses.
okay.
And they build a run through or whatever that is for horses. We had a group go up on the park and clean up trails. We had a group went to Stillwater and treat down and do some construction work. And the gymnasium for people who do like the one way inside, we made shoe boxes for Christmas, the plastic shoe boxes. And we made these actual boxes and kids were common. So we got 120 people show up on Saturday and eat lunch and run in the hole and they were doing crazy things.
Jerry, did you say that was the first time?
That's the first time we had this meeting last week. We will do it twice a year.
So in each one of those opportunities, there could be an opportunity to do with. Because everything I kind of heard kind of has the to do it for, and then thinking about how can we start to build witness underneath that. So you've got a lot of entry points. We're in the meeting process. Andrew, your table. What you hear?
Yeah, I think the most helpful conversation that we had around this was moving 4 ministries to forward listening. Just recognizing, I mean, even at things as simple as Peggy was sharing about how they do a bingo night for one of the homes for mentally handicapped folks, and they've listened to them saying, these are the kinds of prizes we like.
Yeah,
And, so it's just a very easy way to kind of start making steps towards a ministry that's not just, we know what you need, we're going to give to you.
Yeah.
We're going to be there with you. Tom was sharing about, having table hosts at community meals that they're doing and just creating easy ways to start building relationships. And so those two pieces, the relationship building and the listening, I thought were some really good steps and doable steps, right? I mean, that we identified around the table.
So you have two really strong entry points where there is relational connections happening. And the same thing happened. We had 2 relational connecting places. So Karen's doing a community-wide food pantry that started in the church, and now the whole town got so excited that they donated the bottom floor of the town hall. And now they're building a large coalition around that and trying to take, and the people who are serving are saying, we want to go deeper. So in that readiness, their readiness level is very high, and they already have an entry point. So that was really exciting to hear that. And then Ray was sharing, that working in a school and doing mentoring. So there's relational connectivity that can happen around schools. So feeding programs, schools, I love the hot meals because the relational connections that can happen around that. So those are our starting places today. And one of our goals by the end of the day is to figure out where are our strongest entry points. Where are a potential of 3 pilots where we're building on something. And I asked Karen about the 12 years that this pantry has been going on. So these are, if we start with something that's already got some history, it's already done some of that relationship building, you can go faster, farther, if you start there versus we have nothing. If we're starting with nothing, we're going to build off nothing. It's going to take longer. Not to say we don't do it, it's just going to take a lot longer. So I'm going to turn this over to Audrey.
So in our group sessions, we went back to March and what we learned about moving from relief to development, and we heard around the table how difficult that can be, and moving from doing for to doing with. The sessions today move us from individual causes, to a place, to a community, and moving from working with the needy to understanding that those we say are needy and less fortunate have assets, they have gifts, they have knowledge and skill. And then moving from what is our plan, working our plan, to joining God's work. So that's for today, and it's a lot, yes? And then for May is even more intense, moving from informing communities to empowering individuals who then empower their communities, moving from building programs. We know how to program, we know how to be program directors. How do we shift to equipping leaders who may not be members of our church, who are members of a community? And then finally, we love our missions committee. How do we enlarge that so that then we have a beloved community for all of God's people? That's the shift. So we're starting with another scripture. It's Luke 10, 1 through 7. Jesus sends the 70. After this, the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them on ahead of him in pairs to every town and place where he himself intended to go. He said to them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Go on your way. See, I am sending you out like lambs into the midst of wolves. Carry no purse, no bag, no sandals, and greet no one on the road. Whatever house you enter, first say, 'Peace to this house.' And if anyone is there who shares in peace, your peace will rest on that person, but if not, it will return to you. Remain in the same house, eating and drinking, whatever they provide."
This particular scripture is going to be our core scripture throughout the day. And this first session, we're going to be looking at place. So in the very first, that we're sent to go to the place that God sends you. And we're going to be working through some exercises to help us start to think about the place. Take nothing. Now, this is the hard part. No programs, no turkey boxes, no invitation to your church. No, this is hard. We want to be a giver, right? So we want to pack up our stuff and take it. And being stripped down to just being you. Not past, you're just a presence. You are God's presence in the community. This is the hardest thing to empty ourselves of that. And then that speaking peace. We're going to learn a technique, a tool for having conversations that start by assuming the good. Not what's broken in your neighborhood, what's wrong with your neighborhood, but what do you love? What do you love about your community? What's good? And thinking about that peace speaking. And then finding those persons of peace. In that passage, when they spoke peace and people received that peace, and if it returns to you, what do? Kind of dust your feet off, keep it moving. If you're looking for those assets, those persons of peace, and then accepting hospitality, this is my favorite part of that passage. Eat and drink whatever they provide. It didn't say go out and feed, invite. Feeding programs are great, but are we also willing to receive? If somebody says, come on in, have a seat. Mama Winfrey fed me more times than I can count before we started teaching in Northside. And then join God who's already at work there. So this whole process, and it started off actually pray to the Lord of the harvest, is a spiritual journey. Asking God to show us where the Spirit is already moving. Those conversations we just invested in, when you watch somebody get excited about what they're doing, and I heard it in, kind of this corner of the table, this, God did something really cool in bringing this together. You kind of see the beginnings of where the Spirit is moving. And it becomes contagious. Because you'll hear one group has this idea, and this idea back here might bounce right over here, and then everybody's doing, and you'll start to get this energy moving within your association that can overflow into community. So when you think about where was Jesus in that passage? that Luke 10 passage.
Every step.
Say it.
Every step.
Every step, every step. Physically, the person of Jesus in this text, what was he doing?
Sending them out.
He was sending them out to the places he was going, right? So that sending agent, the most important decision that you have to make as we are in this process is, where is Jesus sending your congregation? It can't be about the needs of the community. I had this conversation with Brian. You know, my church was thinking about this feeding program, but it wasn't where they felt called. And then if we just make it about the needs and not the call, it won't last. Burnout, people feel resentful. It has to come from this very deep place of calling. And so we're going to look at some different tools for how to discern that. But ultimately, it is a lot of prayer goes into this. So with Sylvia's church, when we were at Chester United Methodist, every week we had about 80 people first week, and we had about, 10 tables. And we had laid out different neighborhoods. And every week we took away tables. Because we'd say, sit where you feel called. And we had them go and drive around different neighborhoods. And every week at the table that had the least, we pulled the table out. By the time we got to the last week, we had 3 tables. And Sylvia and I we just got to pray we get down to 1, because we can go into 3 places. And it was miraculous. There was a story shared about Broadwater, and everyone walked over to that Broadwater table. So it was a discernment process that the church went through together. And then there was large church buy-in and investment because they were part of the process. Some of your churches, Chester UMC is large. I'm assuming one of the biggest in the room?
It's the biggest in the district. It's almost 1,500 members.
Yeah, so they had a lot of capacity. I mean, enormous. So I don't think it'll take smaller churches as much time to figure this out.
Well, the community is bigger too.
Yeah, the Chester, yeah, definitely. So I'm going to turn this back over to me.
And so I've asked people to read scriptures, please.
Seek the shalom, peace and prosperity of the place to which I have called you. Pray to the Lord for it, because in its shalom, you too will find shalom. Jeremiah 29:7.
The Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your parents' household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Genesis 12:1-3.
But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth. Acts 1:8.
As you think about place and community, God sending people out, I wonder, have you begun to pray about where God might be sending your church, if you're ready for that, and if maybe it would be somewhere close or somewhere nearby? What is your Jerusalem, your Judea, your Samaria? Begins on the earth.
So I want you guys, some of you guys I heard story when Ray was sharing about doing world missions and when we're thinking about where we start, one of the things Brian said is that his church to do the feeding program had to drive all the way to Richmond to get the food, to bring it back. And that distance was a huge barrier for his congregation. So the closer you can get to your church, to your proximity, to a place there people will think of you as neighbor, the better. Now, Ray is an exception. Ray's all over the place because Ray lives in Petersburg, serves in Colonial Heights.
Serves in McKinney.
Well, your church is in McKinney, but your place of ministry to the community is in Colonial Heights. So we're just going to leave Ray over on the side. What to do with that? But as you think about where you feel called, think about your people in your congregation and where they would feel called.
I just think it's important that you share that, because if a pastor leaves here and goes, I've learned this thing and we're going to do this and this is what, that's a bulldozer, and that's not what any of this is about. It's about taking the time with the people whose hearts are ready to sit and discern together. And that might not be this month or this year. But that's the most important step. Where is God calling you to? And don't move until you know what that is.
Exactly.
I agree with discerning where God is calling us, but I think that we should look further than, I think we should balance out seeing our own backyard as well as seeing the ends of the earth, because I don't know that we should let off the ends of the earth.
Well,
and I hope you'll tell us that. Maybe if you get the people in your own backyard excited enough, then it will grow and grow and grow. But I guess I got inspired by a church who united together with other churches, and they raised enough money to buy an ambulance for a country in Africa, and they doubled the ambulances in that country.
Well, and what the focus that we're going to be focused on is relational ministry that can become community transformation that you can have direct impact on. When we're talking about the ends of the earth, the inspiration for people investing often does come from their own experience, but I've seen it go the other way. I've seen folks who have gone to the ends of the earth, been inspired by wonderful community building work that's happening, come back to the U.S. and say, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this in our own backyard? So I think the two feed each other, but it's a different technique, it's a different philosophy of how you engage. So when we're thinking about today, is really those contexts where community development, we had our relief, individual betterment, community development as our focus, where community change, community transformation is both needed in some way and accessible. You guys covered everything south to North Carolina. You guys have a huge swath of the state of Virginia to think about, and this may take you some time to discern. So I'm gonna leave that up there, and we're gonna let it ruminate. Some of you guys already have context in mind, the ones that we've mentioned, but that is an important discernment, and it's not to leave one out or the other.
Okay, the shift from cause to community. So it may not be the ends of the earth, but think about Great Britain when it was an empire and how it colonized India. So how was it possible that that group of people were able to become independent? And Mahatma Gandhi has an answer to that. Gandhi saw that lasting change in society had to be built within the smallest communities that made up the societies, in the villages. Is Carson a village? Did I see that sign, Village of Carson?
Yeah.
He talked about a community building concept he called Village Swaraj, where democratically run villages, autonomous and self-sufficient, could create a larger society where people felt their needs were met and were willing to participate fully. He said that this society was based on individual freedom, where people were responsible for meeting their own needs within the context of their community. So was that how independence came about? Because it started in a small place, in a village, in a community, and then just circled out from there. Wendy, do you have the clicker? John McKnight was the founder of Asset-Based Community Development. And I read this quote: "We don't have a school problem today, we have a village problem. We have a village of teachers who are not teaching." For me personally, I connected it with segregation. And when desegregation came about, and some people didn't want to do that, so talk about a huge shift. That was a huge shift. In my time in Tennessee, instead of desegregating the schools, we had what was called freedom of choice, which meant you could just stay where you wanted to stay. So in my all-Black elementary school, grades 1 through 6, there were 2 of us who decided we were going to the white school because we were just curious. We thought we were smart, and we just wanted to see what was going on and what was different, right? Well, when there was massive resistance in Virginia, you had a village of teachers who decided not to teach. So when you think about the Great Commissions, one of them is go ye into all the world and teach all nations. So are we teaching our neighbors in our community? This might seem out of place, but it's really not. I taught middle school for 15 years. It was special. I was a music teacher. I was a choral director, so I had fun. And when the time came where it was no longer fun, I trusted God to my life. And so we would say there's a three-legged stool. It's the family, you know, the community, and the school that a child needs. And which one of these three do you believe, particularly for middle school students, is most influential in a middle school student's life? The family, the community, or the school? Family.
It should be, but that's not the case.
I think it does influence. You have a broken family, you
Yeah,
have
that's
a broken
true.
kid,
That's
so
true.
it has the most influence. The problem is the broken family, it's not the community. Right.
So my middle school had over 70% children with free and reduced lunch, a lot of female-headed households, a lot of children who had at least one parent incarcerated. I will tell you, in my mind, in the mind of the teachers, the community had the most effect because their parents could not be there all the time because they were working 2 or 3 jobs or just were not present at all. But their peers were always there in that community. When they got on that big yellow bus, they were in that community and they brought that community into the school. Yes.
I think you can combine the two. The family may have the most positive effect if the family is doing what it's supposed to do, but the community can have the most negative effect. I have seen children from homes that I thought were from the outside were perfect, but the gangs got them, and that community influence of the gang drew them away from the family. So I think with that negative influences in the community, that's the devil we need to
I agree with you, Rand, because you can always tell when there's a strong family unit, however it might look, because children know they're responsible to that family, and so they're going to do what they need to do most of the time. But it was really very interesting, the effect
Our
the peer pressure had on them.
gang members in their family didn't show it, and in the school didn't show it. It's when they were in the community that their gang affiliation came out. And they were experts at hiding it. They didn't know we were tapping into their Facebook pages and things. That's the point. They hid it in school. They did not let the school know the gang affiliation. The families didn't know. The community was there. And they were typical gang members. Selling, breaking the laws, and all the things that gang members do.
Yeah, I've had some of those in my classroom, and inside my classroom, they were fun. You know, in a nurturing, caring environment. Yeah, it was that larger piece that pulled the back.
In our community, our schools aren't even accredited. And so anyone that wants to move into that area, there's large big gas area, they're not gonna move right around our area because this Lake Gaston area is, they've got all kinds of accredited schools and things like that. And so in community, I've gone to a couple of the school things that they have. And it's like they really have no plan on what they're gonna do.
So you've got all three pieces that need some attention. In the next exercise that we have, is that you, Wendy? I know some of us have already shared our names, but now let's talk about what community meant for us using these prompts to help us in that conversation at the tables.
And if you'll just break into groups of 2 or 3 and share with a partner your response. So what was your favorite community you lived in? And what did you like best about the community? And how were you shaped by that community? So let's do pairs, unless we have an odd number, and then do 3. So we'll take about 5 minutes to share.
Y'all compare to, no pair. I'll be the audience. Y'all know two. You're with Andrew then. You'll be with Tom. Oh, would you rather me do it and you not do it?
I need to make a note on here, but it's up to you.
You want me to do it?
Sure.
We're restructuring.
What kinds of things, how were the buddy you were listening to shaped by community? Just a couple of answers to that. How does community shape us?
Belonging.
Belonging, a sense of identity, of place and groundedness. Accountability. If Mama saw me, if anybody saw the lady down the street would tell Mama. The village is very effective. Support. Yeah, if something happens and everybody shows up to help.
I'd say responsibility. There's a sense of responsibility for everybody else.
Yes, everybody's.
It's not about you.
Yeah, so what you're doing and your neighbors watching and their kids are watching, so there's that sense of upholding the whole. Yeah.
Space for growth.
Yeah, I mean, how many of you got, growing up, you saw somebody who did the kind of thing that maybe someday, so you're stretching toward that thing. Yeah.
Sometimes it was
I grew up in a small town. I couldn't wait to get out. Now I want to make it.
But now, that is the truth.
Yeah. So community shapes us in some very profound ways. And often we're not aware of it. Like when we're young, and then you look back and you're like, oh, that's why I am the way I am. I blame them. So as we think about it, I lost my little clicker. As you look at your ministry assessment, I want you to think about some of the things that you are doing most of what you're doing falls into what we call causes. So if it's hunger alleviation, is the cause for the purpose of education reform or educating children, what is the cause? And then thinking about underneath cause, there is an underlying community. So the cause for the feeding program that Karen's church is doing is hunger. How would you define your community that is serving, that your food pantry is serving? Am I getting it? Dinwiddie. So serving all of Dinwiddie. So go through, look at your ministry assessment and just put on there what is the cause and what is the community. And they're going to have conversations at the table about that just
So on this sheet, whatever you mark up here, you put parentheses, arrow, or put both the cause and community. It might be hunger alleviation or whatever. Well, and there was one song that, well, those are. So go ahead and take a minute, write down one more causes.
What are kids? Come here, I'll show you. They might come around because they're hiding under rocks. They might not come to your church, but it's pretty much kids everywhere. All right.
So, did everybody get a chance to identify the cause and the community for the various work you're doing? Now, what I'd like to do, so causes really help you identify heartbeat of your church. So, Karen's church, somebody felt passionate about hunger alleviation, and there was enough energy that they were able to take it to the next level. So these causes are clues about what your church cares about, but it's not some of them have never been asked, so you can't say that this is definitely what your church cares about. It gives us a clue. So as you think about those causes, how many of your congregations are doing something around food? Hot meals programs, food pantry, those kinds of things. Raise your hand. All right. Let's count off. We'll do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6 churches? Okay, let's count churches. 6.
No, did it last? It's all 3 of them at the same time.
Okay, one per church. I want to count churches. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
6, 7.
6, 7. 8. 10.
Chester does.
13.
Chester does. Chester does. They're not.
I don't know if this counts as a food thing.
Hard for us to find one that doesn't do it.
All right. Now, another common cause I heard was around schools. So whether it's backpack programs or mentoring or something to do with schools or education strengthening, those kinds of things. Raise your hand if your church is already involved in some kind of school or education program. One per church. Okay, so.
Scholarship for students who can't afford to go to
Okay.
and we also use backpacks.
Okay, so if it's school related, one per, and let's just count off. I'm just trying to get us into our post. 1, 2,
Main Street.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
8, 2 by 3.
13. 15, 16, 17. Okay, wow, we've got more involved in schools and food.
Well, the backpack is food and school.
Oh, yeah. How many of our 17 are mentoring, where you're actually meeting and getting to know the kids? Or relational in some way? How many of them are relational?
I got at least 2 ladies that are doing that.
5, 6, 7. I think I'm seeing about 7 hands. Okay. Yeah, because if it's just backpack, I actually think those would be over in this category. Yeah. All right. Now, looking at your causes, what other causes popped out? I knew these 2 would be high because they generally are in churches, but I don't know what our potential third thing that passion. Okay, but is it around food?
Well, yeah.
So I would put, feeding here.
Oh, like identity development, scouting programs, gym programs,
Yeah, and
Self-development.
self-development.
It's only, we probably hear the schools, but my 2 churches provide scholarships for anybody from Dinwiddie County to take the GED.
Yeah.
And go to take the test, we pay for it. And so it is,
It is education. It's
Education.
helping keep their passion
but it's
for.
also self-development. They're ready,
Yeah.
they just can't afford to take it, so.
Another place I've seen churches is kind of support groups. Even your benevolent, or your grief-related feeding.
Celebrating joining the church triumph and big deal was.
Tell me more.
People die, there's a group that comes together to be present.
So that, is it also kind of a ministry of presence, like being present with people? Is there?
During grieving, during loss.
Yeah. I'm gonna put support, types of support. I've seen divorce recovery, or recovery from addiction, or different types of self-development and supporting the person that's going through that. Would that kind of encompass the passion points, those causes, if we think about these 3 as kind of the potential starting places for relationship building? Will we get the strongest ones in the room, do you think?
My church, and I'm sure this is, we have a high condition and they help people with rent, with electricity, things like that.
Yeah, your benevolence. I'm just gonna put money signs. I'm gonna put food and money kind of here, because that's a relief starting place. This can be more of a mentoring kind of starting. Generally, when you're working here, your starting place a lot of times are tutoring programs and mentoring programs, and how you transition those is going to be, or how you shift. This one, you've already likely got FaceTime. You've already got with adults, you know, I know with your self-development piece, Monica, when you were talking about that as a starting place, is much easier than the starting place of relief. Not easy to get going, but you've already got it built into your program design to have that kind of relationship. So does that encompass our causes?
I wanted to say something that we started doing that I think is a real powerful thing, and that is we let our kids who are in young ages, 5 or 6 to maybe 8 years old, go to classes with our older adults.
Yeah.
In
Oh,
Sunday school,
nice.
on Sundays, and that has been a real positive thing for us because a lot of kids don't know older people and they don't know how to relate to them. And so when you put them in a class with all those older people, all of a sudden there's a relationship that wasn't there before. It brings a lot of solidarity to your church because everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
I mean,
And what we're going to talk about this afternoon is actually doing listening projects that are intergenerational, where you have a young person as the interviewer, but an older, we call them our wise mentors, that are accompanying, and how interesting that dynamic really is. So if we were to break up after lunch around cause, what your church potentially cares about, a starting place, and we were to break into kind of these 3 potential starting places, would everyone see themselves somewhere as a potential starting place? No? Oh, okay, so those who say no, let's talk at around, I only see a couple of heads. Does the majority of the room see themselves somewhere in that? Okay, so we will talk. Okay.
But we need to celebrate where people are too.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, there are a lot of factors involved in where they are, and I would rather people feel like they can be honest than have to pretend that they're.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so we were talking at our table about the readiness. So some of your churches are ready. You know, Kara's like, they're ready. They're ready to go. They just need some advice on how to go. But others at my table said the church is not ready yet. So if your church is in a place of not being ready for something, I encourage you to choose where you're going to have to just kind of watch another church and how they transition to the next level of readiness. And then those stories can go back and they can say, let me tell you the story of Chester. Let me tell you the story of, so that they can start to get ideas about how they can see themselves in the transformation project. So all of your churches on that scale of 1 to 10, we had some ready to hop off, and we have some that maybe aren't even a 1 yet. But you can learn from each other, and that's really our goal for learning cohorts. So we're going to move the conversation to the tables, and I want you to think about the neighborhoods that your program participants, that you have relationships live in. So what neighborhoods do the program participants with whom you have a relationship live? So if you're doing a feeding program, what neighborhoods are they coming from? Dinwiddie is a very large geography. If you were to take that and map it, is there maybe a mobile home park where a large percentage come from? So I want you to move from, you know, an elementary school zone and start thinking about physical spaces, neighborhoods. Now, Brian, you know, he said there's more cows than people. There may not be a neighborhood, okay? So neighborhood language may not translate for some of you, and for definitely table 3. Table 3, your geography is pretty condensed population, so you're gonna have to get down to the neighborhood level to have any real tangible impact on a community. It's going to have to go smaller. This table, it may be an entire county to have enough critical mass. So, and you guys are in between. So, yeah, I'll figure it out. All right, so let's move it to the tables. Help us unpack some of that, or may not. So one of the things that came up at this table is in rural Virginia. These are teeny tiny towns, deeply segregated, deeply. And trying to cross those two halves of a small community is really challenging. Because do you feel like in a small town, do you have that same sense or not so much?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and I was really excited. Tom was sharing that in Emporia, they've recently started a ministerial association that is interracial,
Wonderful.
which is one, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think Hopewell has a group that's interracial.
Chester's is.
Chester's is.
In the last one, annually, we have a community-wide service. And there will be one white preacher and one black preacher. And it's not the same group we meet twice a month, but it's not the same group every time. But we do have that organization, and it's growing, and we're doing things. They actually run one of the things.
So when we're thinking about place, and we look at where our participants are going, our participants that are participating in our programs don't necessarily look like the people in our churches. And I think sometimes that's creating this, what? Where are we going? Kind of feeling to this. So I'm going to give you guys some tools. Before I get to those tools for how to discern, I get this question a lot, so I'm going to actually look at Bethia because this is probably tough. This is a question I got at Woodlake. So what about affluent communities? So people will say to me, people are hurting everywhere. What about those communities? Now, this conversation is about community transformation. It's about neighborhoods changing. And when you think about that, relief, individual betterment, or community development, generally when I dig deeper into the kinds of things that people are talking about are needed, it's really in affluent communities, it's really more in that individual betterment category. So you mentioned opioid crisis. So in Brandermill Church asked this question too, and they said there are so many people suffering from addiction. That's going to move into that individual. It's not that Brandermill overall needs to be transformed because the community is toxic to the people. Like we were talking about drugs and negative influences. It's that individuals have challenges. And so the way you address those needs is not necessarily community development. And so not all the churches are going to feel called to community level transformation. And it may be that a church like Bethesda, so Woodlake United Methodist Church ended up partnering with Belmont United Methodist Church, which is in the city of Richmond, and their feeding program, and helping to strengthen what's happening there, because Woodlake doesn't have presence in a community, a neighborhood type work, where neighborhood transformation would even really make any sense, right? So in Woodlake, we pay people to maintain the, like it's just a different kind of way of thinking about neighborhood. So all are important. Relief, individual betterment, and community development are all very important. But what we're going to be talking about is neighborhood transformation type work.
A lot of us in our church are not in the prison ministry. Yeah. That's definitely community. It's not local, but it's like
yeah, so there's a sense of community within those programs, but there's not a place, like the folks that are coming to the program are going to go back into communities. So I did some work with Prison Fellowship, and I got to know a lady who ended up on Northside. So when I was doing work on Northside, she was part of the neighborhood work that we did, but I got to know her from within. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is actual geographically defined communities. We're also going to talk about these other, so when you're thinking about affluent communities, ask the question, is it relief, individual betterment, or community development that you want to do? Because the approach is different. And does the community overall need to have that need or recognize that need for change? And is there enough motivation? So in Hillside, when people are getting shot in the street, they're pretty motivated to strengthen their community. Wouldn't have that same motivation for action in a more affluent community that wasn't experiencing that. Now, I got the question, there's a little boy in Lincoln Views, and we were teaching him how to do a listening project in his neighborhood. And one day he looked at me and he said, Miss Wendy, is my school a community? And I had to stop. I mean, our students spend a huge percentage of their time. And I said, well, yeah, I think it's community. And he looked at me and said, well, if it's a community, we should be doing it there because it's way scarier than my neighborhood. And his name was Joel. And it took me about 3 years. And then this past year, we started doing school-based organizing using these exact same principles. And we launched there were 3 schools in Richmond through Mayor's Youth Academy, and then Meadowbrook High School in Chesterfield County is training their high school students. And tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I get to find out what the students care enough about that they will organize and change. And I'll tell y'all in May. But thinking about some of you guys working in education in schools, your students are assets. They have gifts, talents, and abilities. So that may be the place, may be a school-based setting. Our churches, I get this question a lot, are churches communities, or the programs like you're talking about, where it's not geographically defined, but it is a sense of community that is happening. And I wrestle with this one because when I go back to the scripture and we're going to places and we're really connecting outside our walls, but I do think there are situations where the church itself is in need of some community building before it's able to go. Now, what you don't want, and what Sylvia definitely doesn't want, is everybody says, okay, we're going to turn inward, we're going to focus on us.
We are a faith-based community.
Exactly.
That's what we call ourselves.
Exactly. So this word community is broadly used, right? Very broadly used. The reason why I bring this up is because when we're going to be moving into community development, in general, we are talking about geography or schools. For most of our time, when I say community, that's what we're talking about, and that's what we're trying to define, is either a geography or a school, and there may be some churches where community may mean the church itself getting to know its own gifts, talents, and assets.
What about a large workplace?
A large workplace, my husband works for Dominion. And I think it very well could be, you're spending 8 hours a day or more there. I think the challenge when thinking about the church is often, if you're only in a place 2 hours a week, it's really hard to make that community. It's very hard. Y'all do it, but it's hard. But places like kids in schools, they're there almost as much as they are at home in their waking hours. So we're going to, I'm going to give you some pointers on how to take the village, how to define your villages. So when we talk about size, you can't eat the elephant all at once. So Emporia, to this table, you're an elephant, okay? 6,000 is huge compared to this community. Now, 6,000 is nothing to the back table, but when you think about it, if you were to map, so this is my neighborhood, this is the north side, it's roughly 6,000. There is no way I can get to know 6,000 people. So what we did is we divided it into the natural villages that people would identify with. So the ideal community size is about 250 to 500 households to start with. Now you don't stop there, but we started, so I live right here. So we started with North Central. This is North Central. Once we got some work happening, block captains and block stuff happening up here, then this neighborhood, this is Battery Park, said, well, we want to join in. And people from that neighborhood stepped up. And then this is North Barton Heights, they joined in, and then this up here is Washington Park. So it started to pop off around it, but we had to stay really focused and tight. So initially, we were trying to do listening in the whole area, and then we would invite people to come. There's a church down here. We'd say, come to this church down here, and we might get 6 people. But then when we started hosting things and inviting my block, so I have 50 people on my block, we invited everybody on my block, we got 20. Because there was a sense of identity. So come to Miss Anita's house, we're having a block party, we get 20. Come to this giant thing that isn't my identity, and we got the dismal. I mean, it was really, interesting. So people tend to connect around the thing closest to them first. Once we started building out block clubs in here. This civic association went from having an average of maybe 6 people to having 25, because the people from the block level started to connect to the neighborhood level. Then when we started to connect the neighborhood levels, we were getting about 100 people coming to gatherings. But if you start really small and tight, because you build a strong, people bump into each other. I see my neighbors. If I'm connecting with people all around here, I might bump into you in the grocery store, but it's far more likely I'm going to get to know the people right around me. Does that make sense? So really think small. Small is powerful. And so Pamplin, I'm moving to Pamplin, population 300. I've gotten to know a lot of my neighbors. And even though I have to drive, a good distance, just to say you're from Pamplin, it's like, you're from Pamplin? Nobody else is from Pamplin. So there's this automatic connection because we've got a shared identity. So it's funny how we are, but that identity and where we call place and we call home is really important. So here, I'm going to give you guys some tools. We're going to come back to those other two in just a little bit. So mapping, if you are doing a food pantry and you use this tool called Batch Geo, free online app, takes about 2 minutes. You take an Excel spreadsheet, you drop it in there, and it maps it for you. Because I was asking Karen, does she know the places that the food pantry participants come? She knew immediately that the top was a mobile home park. Then her guess is about 50%, not real sure on the others, but she tracks all those addresses and everything, so she can drop it into Batch Geo and get a quick visual of exactly where her folks are coming from. And that will help her when she's thinking about, okay, we want to start, so I would start the mobile, and then you'll see the houses, and you'll say, okay, well, that section, her mobile home park is only maybe 30 households. Greenlee, where Chester is potentially going to be working, is 500 plus households. Southwood Apartments, where Belmont is working, is almost 1,200 households. So we're going to narrow down by mapping where our friends live. Partnering with an engaged resident leader, so Karen said she's got a couple of folks who are coming and serving with her now. My next question when I saw, where do you live? I'm just really curious. And if they say, oh, I live in McKinney Trailer Park, really? Our church is discerning a call. Could you help us discern? And invite people to be your ministers of introduction. Then identifying community-based organizations. I think a lot of your churches are partnering with other organizations that might have, so Washington Street is a community-based organization in Petersburg because it's located in Petersburg. A lot of your churches aren't necessarily there, so they would be a great partner. Find out what kinds of things are happening there. Your school officials. So if you are working in a school-based environment and you go to the guidance counselor, CIS worker, principal, and just say, if we were going to invest in a neighborhood, where would be the greatest impact? And your principals know these things, your guidance counselors, they know if they could invest in a neighborhood, where would they invest? And that's how we narrowed down Chester's focus, down to just a handful of neighborhoods because of the principals and guidance counselors. And Google. Google is a great friend. You can learn so much with Google Earth, and you zoom in and you're trying to understand your housing stock, you're trying to understand your assets, trying to understand who's in your geography. Ultimately, what you want, let's see if I can find it again, is to be able to map it out and then see where everything's at, and we'll talk about how to map those assets when we get to the next session. So I think for right now, what I'd like to do, I'm going to explain this tool to you guys. I don't know if we'll have time before lunch to go into it, but if you pull this out, this is the next one in your packet. I'm going to show y'all, this is Woodlake's ministry assessment that we then looked at the opportunities. Across the top, you list those things you're already doing. So they were doing Richmond Friends of the Homeless, and Bethia, I think especially for you guys, you're probably similar to Woodlake in that you probably do a lot. Chester was like this. Theirs was full. You can make multiple copies. list across the top all the things you're already doing. And then start to think about what is the general area. Okay, where in general are we investing? Some of them have no area. So Caritas is all over the place. So there's no geography to Caritas. James Gang is their construction ministry, no geography at all. So they ended up with 3 that have a geographic definition. Then they start to say, okay, is it neighborhood? Can we start to think about a neighborhood? We're able to get Friends of the Homeless is in Gilpin Court. Belmont was pretty scattered, but when we batch geoed it, Southwood Apartments popped out as a concentration of food pantry participants coming. And then this one, we went to A.M. Davis and said, what neighborhood would the school like to see the church invest in? And they said Clover Leaf Lake Apartments. So then we started thinking about, okay, what's already happening? So this was clearly relief. It was a hot meals program, no relationships. They had been there 14 years or something, and I said, tell me about your friends you've met, and they couldn't give me names. So, and that's not on Woodlake, that's just the design of the program. So there was no real relationships being formed. But with Belmont UMC, they were building relationships with their food pantry participants who were coming back and serving alongside. They were playing the piano, they were sharing. They had community building space in their program. And they were actually kind of had moved into some individual betterment. Their participants were engaging, they were helping them find jobs. So there was some depth in this one. With A.M. Davis, all they were doing was a backpack program. They had no FaceTime, they knew no one. So they ended up recognizing that their partnership with Belmont UMC, also Mary Kay Cochran, y'all know Mary Kay? Mary Kay is obviously married to Larry, which is nice because Mary Kay worked at Woodlake, Larry worked at Belmont, so it was a natural marriage between those 2 churches. And it was really neat though to watch Woodlake go through the discernment process and thinking about, now does that mean they're not going to feed the homeless and they're not going to pack backpacks or serve Caritas? Absolutely not. They're going to keep doing everything they were doing. But in terms of a community building opportunity where they could have deep relationships and transform a neighborhood, this is where their strength, the potential for engagement was right here. Now in this room, so Belmont United Methodist Church is in an area of the city that transitioned. So it was a predominantly white community that became a predominantly African-American community, and now the South Side is becoming largely Spanish-speaking. So the neighborhood, so they have 1/3 white, 1/3 African-American, 1/3 Latino. So fascinating church. They already had that when Woodlake started talking to them. So they're walking into a community that has already embraced this diversity of the kingdom, which is really a neat opportunity for a church like Woodlake that wouldn't have that opportunity to build relationships across those boundaries.
But they've done also, they've added Hispanic ministry. So
Right.
They've done some fresh expressions with another Hispanic pastor to broaden their influence.
Well, and then they went through our training, and so did Belmont. So Belmont and Beulah, thank you. Beulah, and now they're sharing a pastor, a Spanish-speaking pastor. So it's really this church-to-church partnership opportunity, I think for a network like yours, is a beautiful way of supporting kingdom work, especially for congregations where place and presence is going to be hard because you're just not physically present in communities that could experience or benefit from neighborhood transformation work. So that's part of why we put you where we put you, so you might see where God is at work in others, where you might want to join in and learn, and then you can take that to your place. Does that make sense? Is this exercise helpful for you guys to think about? This is a really great tool. This one and the ministry assessment form with your missions committees, starting here and then getting them to this place of definition. I've worked with Woodlake, it took us almost a year from my first missions committee meeting when we started mapping this to when we finished their training and they had more clarity. So it's a discernment process, a whole lot of prayer, but those tools hopefully will be helpful to you. So homework assignment for this unit, for this session, you're not leaving, you're eating and we're coming back for more, is really to pray about where God is calling you, and then to physically drive into the places and pray. Now, don't take 70 people into a neighborhood and scare the natives. I mean, it's just really not a good idea. But really ask your folks to independently, or 2 or 3. I think in Chester we have them break into little groups of 2 or 3, and then they would drive different neighborhoods and really pray and walk some of them. And then when y'all come back in May, asking you guys to share some of those stories. And my favorite story was from Chester, the group that went to Broadwater. The lady said as soon as they got out of the car, these 2 little girls came running up to them and hugged their legs and said, "Are you my," what was they called, my special buddy? "Are you my special buddy?" And just melted the hearts of everybody in the room. Well, we didn't know, but there's some program called Special Buddies, and they just happened to get out of the car with these 2 little girls, and it just was this moment where they felt welcome and like this was the place God was calling them to. So trying to get from our church services, this huge area, to this is the place we're called. It's a hard one. What we're going to do is we're going to eat, and then we're going to talk about assets. We're going to talk about what we do when we get there. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Andrew. So we're going to actually move into some of the asset mapping part of our plan for today. And I want to start us out by understanding the overall model. So this is our Empowered Communities model. There are 4 processes. They are not phases, they are processes. So think of them as the legs of a table, and they are always ongoing. But you actually build them in this order. So the first process that you build when you're thinking about doing this work is to discover the gifts. Gifts fall into 2 types of categories. One are dreams, aspirations, hopes. Those are gifts. So a community's dreams are very important. But they're actual physical, tangible assets. And we're going to do some exercises today to help you see the difference between those 2 things. Once you're able to map assets, so during, y'all didn't know this, but myself and Audrey and Andrew, as we were listening to you guys, we were listening for assets. We were listening for those congregations that can serve as a lead in some potential community building, because you've already built some of this. You've already got some of this down. So as you're mapping, you're listening for leaders, you're listening for energy. That develop leader part kind of grows out of that. Then building teams, and the last is partnering with institutions. So today we're going to focus on asset mapping. In May, we're going to cover the bottom three. So when we think about the way we go about doing asset mapping, Audrey's going to, where'd Audrey go? Right here. Audrey's going to, you asked me to go back? Audrey's going to invite us to think about asset mapping through this lens.
Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Philippians 4:8. So the practice of appreciative inquiry goes into that scripture. So we learn to look at the gifts and assets and dreams of the neighbors as the equivalent of the glass being half full. And we do not begin with what is missing, we begin what is present. What do our neighbors have to give and to offer? And what are their strengths? Not necessarily what are their weaknesses.
So when we think about assets, these are the 6 assets found in every single neighborhood. So individuals, those are your residents, right? Every neighborhood has individual assets. Most neighborhoods have associational assets. So this is your PTAs, this is your neighborhood civic associations, friends of the library, those types of associations. Every neighborhood has institutions. This is your schools, your nonprofits, your government agencies. You have physical assets like parks and church buildings and green spaces. You have methods of exchange. So this could be barter systems, or this could be businesses. So how people exchange goods and services. And you have culture, story, history, and group norms. We were talking at the rural table about the history of our nation and of a lot of people that were sons and daughters of the Confederacy, and that story and that narrative, and how that is an important part of the history that we're walking into and why some of this conversation can be challenging. So thinking about those 6 assets and the importance that they play. We are going to spend today on the top 3. And we're going to start with individuals because we operate off of the principle of subsidiarity. The principle of subsidiarity is an organizing principle that proposes that matters ought to be handled by the smallest, lowest, least centralized, competent authority. Competent, very important word in this sentence. So is it more likely that the federal government knows what my needs are, or is it more likely that my family is more equipped? The same with, our mayor versus my civic association leader to know what's going on in my neighborhood. So when we're thinking, we start with the smallest unit and we work our way up. This is exactly opposite of what most people do. The institutions are very visible. And so most organizers start with the institution, and what I hear from a mom about what her child needs could be very different from what I hear from the principal. So starting with the smallest, closest, least centralized competent authority. So in a neighborhood, it would be neighbors. And we map our gifts using this methodology. So generally, we do this in groups, the heads, hands, and heart. And what I'd like you to do, there are stickies in the middle of your table. Does everyone have orange? All right, pull off 3 orange. Everybody get 3 orange.
Aren't you glad I didn't?
Now, what you're gonna do is lay those three side by side. And on each one, you're gonna write one asset related to your head. And a gift of the head are things you know enough about that you could teach someone else. So these are gifts of the head.
This
So
is for us personally?
for you personally, yep, we're mapping the gifts in the room.
So you write it all on one sheet and one on each sheet?
One on each sheet. You're gonna come up with 3 gifts, one on each sheet. So Brian, where's Brian go? Brian shared that he worked for the Department of Social Services and worked in low-income communities, Broadwater in particular. So he said, we need to map the gifts in this room. This is the process. So Brian might write working with folks through DSS or understanding government systems or whatever. So think about gifts that you might have that could contribute to this, things you know enough about you could teach someone else. It doesn't have to do with community development. It just was a perfect example. No. 3 different sheets, 3 different gifts. So not 3 things on one sheet, 1 gift per sticky note. 1 gift per sticky note. Because part of what you do is you actually start to cluster. So let's say Brian's also a great cook. So we would pick up his cook and we'd put it with your cook and with your cook, and then we could see a cluster of cooks. So you want 1 per sticky. Gifts of the head, things you know enough about that you can teach other people. When you finish your orange, get a green. Green, and do 3 stickies again. Blue. Close to green. Do 3 again, and on your blue-green, you're going to do gifts of your hands. So these are things that gifts, talents, abilities, don't get stuck on the hands part. I did a training in Hillside and everybody said texting because they got fixated on hands. So these are things like gardening, cooking, those practical skills and abilities things that you like to do that are those practical gifts. So head is something you can teach other people. Hands is something you enjoy doing, and they can be saved.
So there you go.
Okay. Yeah. So there are certain things you enjoy doing, but you never want to teach someone else. I learned a horseback ride on Saturday. Don't ask me to teach you anything. So, does that make sense? But they can be the same thing. Yeah.
What you do with your hands? Well, you can, this is head. And you need to song.
When you finish your blue green, it's your pink. Now this one is about gifts of your heart. These are things you care deeply about.
It would shock me if somebody doesn't say spiritual formation, something you care deeply about. A lot of times in neighborhoods, I'll get family or animals or social justice, you know, think your passion points. Now, once everyone has finished in your group, Andrew and Audrey, if you'll facilitate the clustering. So what you're going to do is go around your table. You don't need to elaborate. Say what you wrote, because we can be here all day. And put them in the middle, and then help each other cluster. So what you want to end up with is everybody who's a cook, theirs is going to be in one area. Does that make sense? You're going to see where your clusters are as a group. And you're just put it right in the middle of your table. And if you don't have three, it's okay,
I do.
What are you doing?
I'll organize around heartbeat. Heartbeat. So at that table we clustered, and our strongest heartbeat was around children and youth and education. So that was that cluster of youth education with a lot of teaching and reading going on back here. What was your strongest heartbeat? So Audrey, your table, the most number of pink. Children in education, we kind of know spiritual formation is likely to be kind of high. So I'm going to look to like our community engagement pieces. Andrew, what did you have for your highest?
Kind of a broad.
So community building, service to the poor. So the next step you would do, and actually, table 3, I shouldn't have had y'all start. A lot of times I'll do this.
Please, let's listen for a few minutes and then we'll have opportunity.
Yeah, my voice isn't going to last too much longer. So after you identify the heartbeat and you put your top 2 or 3 or 4 up in a room. So I would do this in a community gathering. We would map heads, hands, and heart, and then people would get to vote on which of the top passions that they were excited about. Then we would take heads and hands, and that's what I had table 3 working on, was thinking about if you were going to focus on education and youth, what gifts might you use? So what did y'all come up with in terms of gifts you might use to address that? I gave them like 2 minutes, so.
We had a lot of reading and writing. We had some technology stuff. You were just mentioning we had a lot of crafts and arts type programs.
Very hands-on. So you use the heads and the hands gifts to start to flesh out your action plan. So your action plan takes your passion and then uses the gifts you have to help you achieve whatever that end goal is. So this is just a launching exercise to start to get to know people. Did y'all learn anything about anyone at your table that was pretty cool? So share, Andrew, what was the most interesting thing y'all heard at your table?
Well, our final 2 post-it notes that were left were Rachel's love and Tom's online gaming. We decided those couldn't be grouped together, but I thought it was just kind of a funny way to end.
Yeah, that's awesome. How about Audrey? What about your table? What stood out to you? A lot of music, good. Yeah, cooking is usually really, really high. Now my back table, we've got a lot of business minds. So if you want us to interpret your legal documents, or help you with your church audit, or do your bookkeeping, I mean, it was very interesting the skill sets of this table, along with a whole lot of arts and crafts. We had a lot of arts and crafts skills, and a lot of outdoorsy, hiking, paddling, those kinds of things as well.
So just to clarify, this is modeling for us a tool that we would be using in kind of an initial organizing gathering within a community?
Exactly. So this table, all of you are working in a food pantry or working in a food ministry. So imagine at your next dinner, your hot meals, you're going to do, today we're going to celebrate gifts. Maybe it's Thanksgiving and we're going to talk about the gifts we all have. And we're going to do this heads, hands, and hearts so we get to know each other. And when you discover someone's passion, when you get to that pink, pay really close attention to what people care about. Because what people care about is what they're going to be motivated enough to get involved in. So if I did this in a group setting, in a neighborhood, I would take those top things and I would ask people, I'd give everybody a smiley face and I'd put them up on the wall and I said, if you would show up, if we chose, so ours was education and children was one of the top ones, let's say that got the most stickers. If you would come back to use your gift to achieve this goal, would you come? Use your smiley face to put on the one you come back to. So now you're letting the community tell you what they care enough about that they would come back. Now, they also have ownership of it now because they picked it. So if they picked it, you know, they're far more likely to come back. Does that make sense? So we're starting the process of really identifying people by giftedness. I mentioned that I'm moving to Pamplin. In small communities, at least in Pamplin, everyone is known by their gift. So there's Yoga Mary, because she does yoga. There is a farmstead Mary, and there is Horse Mary. So everybody's named Mary in Pamplin, so if you go to Pamplin, just say hi, Mary. But it was really interesting when people would talk to me, they would define someone by their gift. I don't know, I think in rural communities, people have those more visible gifts. And one lady does woodworking, and she said, I can make anything out of wood. This is what her t-shirt said. What's your superpower? And I've been walking around Pamplin, I have a superpower. Because everybody else's gifts are so visible. And I think in our urban communities, they're almost completely invisible. And this exercise is about making gifts visible. It's bringing those gifts to the surface, and it also is a community building exercise. When you meet someone else who has your same gift, there was a writer over here, and I pulled that writing sticker closer to me because I love to write. I don't know why, I probably will never get to work with this writer, but I have an affinity for people who have an affinity for the same things I have an affinity for. So that's the goal of this exercise, is for you to start to think about gifts. Now let's take this back. So you guys are at your tables, you're getting to know each other. When we're partnering well, or if we're all in Petersburg, or we're all thinking about food ministry, our gifts can help each other in this network too. But the main goal is to think about how you start to see the invisible in the context of where you're working. So that's heads, hands, and heart. It's super easy, and it's really fun. And we don't have time to cluster it all, but when you do, a lot of times what I do is I take the stickers. Oh, the one thing I meant to say and I forgot. when you give the instructions to have people put their gift, have them put their name or initials. Yeah, because you can use these to organize. Usually what I'll do is when everybody comes back the next time, I have it all clustered, and it'll say spiritual formation 9. And then I'll have a list of the 9 people who said that. But yeah, I forgot to say that. Thank you. So this is what my neighborhood looks like. This is pretty typical. Cooking is almost always toward the top. What's beautiful about cooking is that hospitality and the practice of hospitality is the best community building thing ever. Food, anything around eating. Our second is music. And then our third is kind of this arts and crafts and community social stuff. So when you do this in a neighborhood over and over and over again, you start to see these buckets, these clusters that start to form. And then you can start to, it's kind of like having building blocks, like Lego blocks shaped in a different way. And you can start snapping things together, and it's really a lot of fun. So you guys all have in your packet an asset mapping exercise. And I believe the top of yours has a place for your name and your church's name. Correct? So we talked about when we're asset mapping, we actually start with the individuals who live in the neighborhood. So what I want you to do is take just a few minutes to think about who in this community cares about the community. Now, you guys, in the context of a feeding ministry, think about the feeding participants, the people who are coming and receiving that we would historically think of as recipients, who would care about strengthening that sense of community or place. Now, if you have real clear, you said Pocahontas. So you have a feeding ministry, you already know that the neighborhood you're going to be working probably around is this Pocahontas neighborhood. Think about who cares about Pocahontas, and the same with your mobile home if you can get that specific. Tom, I don't know if you know a neighborhood that will be, that a lot of the people come to your feeding program potentially. So you might think of just that level of community. This group, I know some of you guys are working in Petersburg, so be thinking about people who live in Petersburg. That would be a good asset. And everybody can put Ray on your form right now. He's the only person I know who lives in Petersburg. That's his wife. That's great. I did not. So this table is you think about partnering well. Do you have anybody that's clearly about anything? We do not. So this is Michelle. Michelle is a YMCA. And then Chester Brown
All right, so y'all can jump on into this. Just start with the brainstorming about names, and we'll go from there, because you can't get anywhere until you come up with people.
So some of us are jumping to institutions, which is where we're going next. I'm going to take the whole group there. The one group that I saw that was really able to start to define names is Karen, because they've already got this community engagement piece, so they're going to keep working on theirs. And then I'm going to explain how a partner can really help you with this. So the gifts of individuals is what you're trying to get to. Sometimes we have to go through ministers of introduction because we don't have any relationships. And so one of a really great place to start is to think about the natural associations that are already there. So think about the neighborhoods or the communities, and y'all mentioned some pastoral networks, like that. I know Hopewell, someone said Petersburg, there's a group of pastors so that's an association. Associations are informal. They can be more formal, but you're not forced to go. Nobody's paying you to go. They're made up of local citizens that get together around common concerns or goals. They decide what they want to do, how they want to do it, and then they take action. Associations are the principal vehicle for releasing gifts. So just knowing that Brian has this knowledge of social services isn't going to impact anything unless he is plugged into an opportunity to use that gift. So some network or association where that gift gets released. So associations are incredibly important in the gift releasing piece. So make a list of the associations that you know. So Emporia, I'm sure it could be schools, it could be neighborhoods, could be any kind of association. And also think about informal groups. I used to be a part of a play group. A bunch of moms got together at the playground, and we were an informal association. People who played chess or fishermen that get together. So think formal and informal, and make a list of associations. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and walk y'all through institutions. So if you finish associations, you can go on to that. The difference between institutions and associations, we use a circle to think about associations because it's shared power. Everyone has voice, everybody counts. In an institution, you have concentrated power. So you have someone in charge making most of the decisions, and then those decisions flow down. Institutions are generally more structured, more formal. They organize for consistency, sustainability, and reliability. And they're in every single neighborhood, but I've got a warning. When you try to put institutional leaders and associational leaders, they always come out on top. If you take, the mayor and bring him into your civic association, everyone in the room is going to clam up because they feel the power of an institution. So when we go, the Department of Social Services, Bonnie Bell's done a lot of organizing with me. I'm like, Bonnie, please don't tell me you work for. You're just somebody here curious to learn because it changes the whole power dynamic. So I want you to take this list and think about associations. You'll put those right here. Think about the institutions. And then on this side, what gift do they bring? So let's say it's a pastor's association, and maybe it brings connection to neighborhoods that your congregation may not have. So what is the gift? It may be a building. So think about associations and institutions, and let's just take a few minutes to put those on our list.
Got some ideas, Phil? Sure. Well, you've been a little out of pocket. As far out of pocket as you can get. Not too regular. You got some ideas for associations? I wonder what that says about community and about relationship between community and there are people in the community that are interested in revitalizing neighborhoods, but the fact that none of them are willing to be a part of that, that's even out of the government organization a job of communication. We asked one person and said no, so you couldn't find anything.
If I can get everybody's attention, I want to introduce y'all. We have a guest that joined us during lunch. So I want to introduce you to Michelle. Michelle is what partnering well looks like. Okay, so Michelle is with the YMCA of Chester. The Chester Y has made a commitment to being in the community. She is the one and only full-time community development person in the YMCA network whose job is to be in neighborhoods. She's not in school. She does do some in school. She's not working out of her own building. She's not working out of school. She's in Greenlee and Broadwater neighborhoods. That is your ideal partner. Somebody who knows the neighborhood, the real neighborhood, not just in their buildings. That makes sense? So she's institutioned. Now, over the last many years, she's started some expressions of associations. They don't sound like they don't have association on the end, but tell them about your Girls Can and some of the other things.
Now that we have the team, we're trying to build that up and there. Obviously, now we're working with the adults, and like that's where we're going to try to implement our mapping, is finding adults that are already invested in themselves and their
So when I asked Michelle on this list, who else cares about this community? So there were 3 young people that you named, Christian, and I forgot the other. So these are 3 young people who are already volunteering. So they'll come up to Michelle and say, hey, can I help with the little kids? High school students who are serving. So they demonstrated their commitment. Then Michelle's been looking for adults and parents. So have you identified kind of 3 more?
Yeah, we have adults that are interested in doing it, whether they're actually committed is something different. So I'm trying to get more time that will say if they're interested in doing it, but we can stem from this adult class.
So it was an ESL class that ran for
3 months.
3 months, and so they had, you signed up, how many?
It was about 60 participants.
And then you ended up with how many?
A very small area, so we have 2 classes, about 20 and 35.
And then graduates, how many graduated?
About 45.
So now she has a pool of 45 that know her as a friend. They've gotten to know the why, but she's now going to start her mapping and looking for assets within that sub-population. So instead of her kids just knocking doors randomly, they've already identified 45 people who have made a commitment to their own self-development and have a relationship with the why. So when we're thinking about partnering well, back table, that's a great example of finding somebody with that presence. So when you looked at your map and you started to think about associational and institutional assets, give me some other examples. So the why is a great one. Thank you, Michelle. Any other examples?
I have just our local social services.
Yeah. And are you in Chesterfield County?
Yeah.
Do you know Bonnie Bell?
Maybe so. My sister used to work for social services.
Bonnie Inchbell she's 40 years, Department of Social Services. Yeah, you gotta know Bonnie. Everybody knows Bonnie. Yeah, she's amazing, and she knows every Chesterfield County neighborhood, and she can help you identify other assets in neighborhoods. Yeah, tell us about what you're doing.
So it's a Monday week after school program that's meeting with Catherine States from Thomasdale High School. And during this time, like it's about building relationships, finding rest, getting support, and just because this is like such a critical time in this cancer, so like just meeting needs like a nap or eating, getting homework done, talking to just a supportive adult, playing games, like just having space to be a kid. A lot of the kids that live in trauma or live in unsecure housing, they don't have a chance to just be themselves and be a kid. And even though they are in high school, like they're still kids. So three big points are like academic support and college and career skills. So I want to support them in their school and getting good grades, but then also giving them tools and knowledge to be successful after high school, whether they go to college or go to trade or go straight to the job field. Another part is life skills and social skills building. So experiencing new things, finding joy, new things like just really bringing out their gifts and talents, and then also a space to learn about different things. So we want to talk about friendship, like learning about relationships, things that are going on in the community or in the world. So we had a discussion about guns and gun violence, and then also giving them an opportunity to serve. So not only like are they being served, but they're also giving back. So we've been doing some stuff like backpack ministry. So like when they come during the week, they'll go back to bags for the elementary school. Or we had our Caritas week. They packed the lunches for the following day. And then finally, just recently, we took 2 of the kids. We got somebody to sponsor them, and we sent them on a mission trip with us. So that was a really cool opportunity for them to give back and be a part of our church, but also empower them in give them, like, let them see that. I think sometimes when you're being served, you feel like you can't give back. And so giving them an opportunity to matter, an opportunity to be a leader, and develop some skills and relationships and have a new experience.
Wonderful. So obviously that passion around youth, when you're listening to Chester and a partnership with the Y, and has already got a heart for young people, and that vocational development piece. The Y does a lot on vocational development as well, and part of the process we're going to look at is how to teach young people to identify assets and build their own interviewing skills is a life skill. And the ability to look at the world for what it's got, its strengths, instead of looking for what's broken. So you're giving young people a chance. So one of my favorite things to do is engage young people in asset mapping. So those are some examples of kind of some partners that you might identify. You're looking for partners who have presence in a neighborhood. If you want to do neighborhood development, if you want to do school-based development, thinking about partners in schools. So Communities in Schools is another great partner of ours, and organizing high school students to think about how to strengthen their school. So the first decision for your congregations is to think about, if you're going to do kind of community building, do you feel called to a geography of a neighborhood or a community like a school starting in that place? And it really is going to depend on the heartbeat of your church. So those of you who are doing feeding ministries kind of as a starting place, your roots are likely to drill down into a neighborhood. Those of you who are doing backpack ministries and things of that nature, you're likely to build a relationship with a school, would be my guess. So when we're thinking about our role, we know that institutions and associations, that community, your power is in the institution. So you're a gapper. You're standing. So Michelle is a gapper. She's listening to what those kids are telling her, and then the Y is an institution. She's translating back to her institution and saying, I'd like these kids to do this. I'd like to be able to engage the young people in this. So she's giving them more and more voice. Chester Y did a great job of giving the kids voice. So they actually had the kids come and preach, or not preach, but share during a Sunday sermon, so that the community members, the institution is the church, being able to bring people's voice into the room. Because right now, a lot of us are struggling with who are those assets, who are those people. We don't know the people in the neighborhood so much. So how do we start to hear deeply? So that gapper role is really critical. Roles of institutions. Churches are institutions. Number one rule of social work, never do for others what they can do for themselves. And when you're thinking about communities, you're asking yourself the question, what can the neighbors themselves do? So if you're doing a feeding program, can the neighbors, so we were doing one of the mobile food pantries for Feed More, can the neighbors stack the cans of vegetables and help people through the line and sign people in? Well, of course they can. They don't have a big truck to bring the food in, so Feed More did that. Rule number 2, offer support for other people's plan and don't take over. So a lot of times I was talking to somebody and they're like, oh, I met this lady and she's cooking in a small cart, and I just think we should get a church, and the church could have her cooking, and then she could have a whole catering program, and she could build this workforce development thing, and she could, and it went from a little baby spark to this mammoth thing that this poor woman who was doing the feeding cart would feel totally overwhelmed to try to take on something that large. So let people take their idea, and then you offer what they need. You're meeting a need versus trying to direct. And then rule number 3, when necessary, use your power to advance the neighbor's agenda. Some of you guys sit at tables of power where a lot of our friends will never have access to. So how can you open doors? How can you create awareness in communities that need to have that presence at the table? So thinking about your assets, once you can define your geography, whether it's school or it's a neighborhood-based geography, and then start to look, where are my associations? So this is my neighborhood. Little smiley faces are all my individual assets.
it really helps you start to think about what you've got to work with in terms of your neighborhood development effort. So what I'd like to do, because we've kind of been sharing out of our asset mapping for a little bit, did y'all get to share your tables around associations and institutions? Or not? Got to share? Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Audrey to kind of help us process this session.
Oh, that was a lot of information to take in, particularly right after lunch. So what stood out for you, or what stands out for you right now in the place where you are, where your congregation is, where you are as a pastor? What are you grappling with? What are you processing? Elena?
I'm just gonna trickle into the thought of like the police rather than but Amy also said that we could police schools, so that kind of
Where is the community? Yeah. And you're partnering with, if Chester's partnering with the Y, you've got your place there. Yeah. Really. Yeah. That is hard. Anyone else struggling with place? Yeah, I think there's been a struggle in the room today, just overall.
Even for Petersburg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That seems pretty specific, and yet it really isn't. And so we still need to do some prayerful discernment about what, where, kind of what.
It may be coming out of our church work being confined to the church place, and our not being in neighborhoods or with our neighbors. And so once we begin, we realize, oh, I may not know my neighbors or that. Yeah. Shifting from needs to assets, shifting from how we see other people whom we have given so much for years and centuries. We give everything, we give ourselves. So now the shift to understanding all of God's people have gifts and assets and talents and desires and dreams.
Shifting from wanting to fix it to helping other people fix it.
Yeah.
That means I gotta give up control.
It's all about control and naming. Other people get to name, to have a voice about what they really want.
It's such a huge shift. I mean, you know, I remember, you know, Wendy would be good at kind of jerking us back to, no, you're not, this is your, because it's just so automatic for us for me, I don't need to talk about it, it's so automatic for me to want to be in control. I know how to do this, you know, and but it is actually so beautiful to watch what blossoms when you can get out of the way and give people space and freedom and safety to develop and emerge. It's beautiful, but it's you know, we think about the shift for them, but the shift for us is so significant.
Yeah.
Jesus had 12 when he did this.
He had 12,
And then
the 70. And he has all of us. Challenges, benefits.
I mean, you know, to start considering stuff that we never really thought about before, you know, is a big step. I mean, and working in the direction of accomplishing these things, you know, big things start small. And God, you know, the things He can do with a seed are pretty amazing. You know? So, you know, to think only in terms of the obstacles and challenges that we face is self-defeating. We've got to go look beyond that in terms of what God's vision is for what He wants us to do in the community.
I think it's loving our neighbors.
Amen.
You know what I mean? It's really loving our neighbors in the way Christ intended, instead of the really packaged ways that we've always done it.
And you got to approach it on a human level. People don't care what your title is. They really could care less. There's only one person whose title really matters, and that's Jesus.
When I think about the work we started in Broadwater and we went deep and may have wanted to go deeper, when I think about the lives of the teenagers, their lives live on, and we may never know what becomes of it. And we're not here to say it was a success or it was a failure, because God is still in the mix and God is still working with that seed we planted. So you go.
I think that the church has been kind of wallowing in this scarcity. You know, I see it as a shift from scarcity to abundance. When you start thinking about the assets first, you automatically start thinking about the abundance that you have. Because once you start thinking about assets, you see a lot of assets. I think we have all these assets. And so I think it might even shift the church, help make this shift in the church, which is something that's desperately needed. It's like, you know,
do we believe
we have 2 loaves and 5 fish, or 5 loaves and 2 fish, whatever it is.
We're not starting from scratch. We're not starting from scratch.
We don't have no food.
Do we believe that our neighbors have all of these assets? That's the fundamental question of human nature. Right. Do we really believe that? Yeah. All righty. Any other ideas or thoughts that you want to share?
Well, I think when we look out at our neighbors, we look at them with a scarcity.
They're the poor and needy. Yes. What could they have?
Yes, that's what we get frustrated about that.
What could Mary and Joseph have?
I think of the scripture, faith without works. We don't get out there and do something. What does that say about our faith?
I think serving on a mission trip in a poorer area, and we were there to help rebuild after hurricane. And I met this lady, and we were painting her house because it desperately needed it. I asked her what color she wanted her doors. She said, you can choose. I never thought of poverty being the choice of the color you want to be and what that is helping. I never thought of that. I painted her door red.
That's a beautiful, like we talked that first time about power. And that ability to choose is about power. And so we're trying to transfer power and give choice back to the community and not rob people of that decision-making power. And we want to figure it out before we go, right? We want to have the plan all figured out, the program all set, and everything lined up, and then there's no spirit movement in there. And that's when Celia said, we had no idea what would happen. And every week we would just pray and God show us the next faithful step. So as we think about our next faithful step, this has, I know, is a lot of it. Okay, I usually do this over 6 weeks. Okay, this has been a very intense session. My thought, as we've been trying to show you guys as we went, to try to get you to a decision point so that your group is kind of in that same decision-making process. So it's back table number 3, really thinking about place. And can you partner well with a community-based organization or with a school? That is really where this group is still discerning. Where's my place? Who's my partner? Where might I go from here? This table, you have a sense of place. You have it through your existing ministry. And so thinking about how do you can actually move to the asset mapping process and really start to think about who are the gifts, who are the neighbors who care enough that they would be a part of our process. And so you're to the point where you could start to invite 3, 4, 5, 6 people from your existing ministry to serve as an advisory team for you. They can help you start to meet more people because you have enough clarity about place. This table, your place is big. Petersburg is big. And currently, there's not a congregation within this mix that is standing up and saying, we've got the relationships with the neighbors. So you've got place without relationships in a particular community. So you have two options. You can build the relationships yourselves, or you can partner well. And you can start to think about, maybe we start with a local elementary school. We discover what gifts, talents, and abilities they might have that can lead us to a place. But you guys are still in place, but you're at least all collected around that. Very good place. So this next session we're going to do, we're going to just touch on some tools. We're not going to go super deep because most everyone's still discerning place in the room. So this next shift is moving from working our plan to fueling our dreams. And I'm going to walk us through.
So how do we begin? Where do we begin? I took my shoes off, sorry.
Hold around.
I didn't know you were funny.
You do not begin without listening. We do not begin without listening. Listening to the Holy Spirit, listening in our prayer time, listening in our groups at church. It has to begin with listening with us first, especially here because we're not ready for community listening at all. In your churches or the food pantry or Petersburg or with your partners, what do they care about that they would act? You just said faith without works is dead, but then you have to say, what am I inspired to coalesce around? It's really not clear. When we find a common cause, that will unite us, and then we can answer what do people care about. So with this table, you're caring about hunger and food. And the table 3, you want to partner together. So your listening would be about that. It's still the same kind of listening. When you would go into a community, you correct me if I'm just saying that. So I'm sorry, I'm supposed to read the PowerPoint. So the key to answering that question is discovering a common cause that unites the community. The first step in doing this is to identify a few key residents who are persons of peace. And I know we asked about that at one table where I was earlier today. Are you in relationship with persons of peace? That's what I asked with Prince George in the cooperative ministry. And you said you had a couple of parents who drive teenagers to the weightlifting at Washington Street. Are they persons of peace? Or community-based organizations who will serve as ministers of introduction and help you find the persons of peace. So that's the shift from our plan to fueling dreams is a lot of listening.
So this tool, and so I think everybody should have this in your handout. It looks like this. It says Neighbor Strength Survey. And there's 2 parts to the Neighbor Strength Survey. Well, actually 3. The top part is all just information that you're collecting, the name of the resident, phone number information. But the heart of this, so this is done one-on-one in an interview form. This is not something you hand out to the community and have them fill out and get back to you. Because the goal is not the information, it's the relationship that starts to get built when interviews are done. So how long have you lived in the neighborhood? That tells you what they're likely to know. If they moved in last week, they're probably not going to be a good minister of introduction because they probably don't know a lot of people. What do you like best about your neighborhood? This really tells you if they're a person of peace or not. If you say, what do you like best about the neighborhood? I hate this place. I can't wait to get out of here. I've been trying to get out for 50 years.
probably not the person you're looking for, right? If they say, I love this place, I love the people, have you met Miss Jane, and have you met Mr. Joe, I just love these people. Probably a great minister of introduction so that you can get to know the rest of the neighborhood. So what do they like best? It also helps you find assets. So if they say, I love that youth program that Chester UMC is doing, all right? I love that park. You know, you'll start to pick up assets simply by asking this question. The other thing is with this question, if you go up to the door and you say, what does your neighborhood need? Versus, what do you like best? Think about how you come across with those two questions. If you ask about needs, you're assuming their neighborhood is needy. If you say, what do you love best? You're assuming there's something good. So when Audrey, when we were talking about our perceptions about scarcity, and Mary, correct? About scarcity and abundance, that question is showing that you're assuming it's an abundant community. There is a lot to be proud of. And you said, so I always wrap up the heads, hands, and heart by saying, look at the number of people at your table. You have 9 gifts each. So if 10 people at your table, you have 90 gifts. Now, it's only 9 people. Neighborhoods have hundreds. If you can do this in a neighborhood, you end up with thousands of gifts. So exactly what you were saying. Our neighborhoods are rich. I don't care how much economic poverty there is. They are rich with assets. We just can't see them. So it's making the invisible visible. This third question is a heartbeat question. This is getting at your pink when you do heads, hands, and heart. If you could change anything about your community, what would you change? This is what we organize around. This is, I'm listening. So I'm trying to figure out, what is your motivation for action? If you tell me that you're likely, that if you could change anything in Greenlee, I wish there was a better playground. And I hear that over and over and over and over and over again. Now I know that I have enough people, so I'm trying to get 6 or 8 people who care about the same thing. If you can get 6 or 8 people that care about roughly the same thing, then you've got enough to have a little steering team, a little core team of people who can help you take it to the next level. The fourth question, if others care about the same thing you care about, can we count on you to join in? So this is your, I always think of it as a magic key to get back in the door. So if they say, yeah, sure, other people care, I'd show up. Then I go back and say, guess what? 6 people care about what you care about. And so it's your hook to get them to connect once you're able to discern what people care about. And the last question, who else cares about what you care about? You're working their network. So if Karen and Tom both care about feeding ministry, and they know each other, and we have a meeting about feeding ministry, and I say, Tom, you know Karen's going to be there. Oh, really? More likely to come than if they don't have any connection. So if you can work people's natural network. The other thing is when I would go and knock on the door and say, Mr. Jones told me you cared about safety in the neighborhood. Yeah. He's more likely to let me in because I know somebody he knows. So this question is a really important one from an organizer standpoint. So these are the core 5 questions. The rest of that survey is getting at the heads, hands, and heart questions. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself? What is your occupation? What do you like to do in your spare time? Hands. Gifts of the hands. What do you know enough about to teach other people? Gifts of the head. Any gifts, talents, or abilities you'd be willing to share with your neighbors? That's catch-all, everything. So what 5B, what groups, associations, and organizations are you a part of? You're mapping institutional and associational gifts. So this tool brings together everything we've talked about today. This tool is used one-on-one. Heads, hands, and heart is used in a group. So you're always looking for ways of exposing gifts and abilities. So what I'd like to do, so this is your homework assignment, is to start that listening process. For those of you who don't have the context of a neighborhood, so Karen, it would be with the 6 people that you wrote down.
those of you who are still in that discernment, try this with some of your church members. Maybe your missions share, your missions committee. If you could do anything to strengthen our community, what would you do? So Emporia, you might say, if you could do anything to strengthen Emporia, you're trying to find passion. And if your people, like your church members, are from Emporia, that's going to resonate with them. What you don't want to do is say, Bethia, what part of Chesterfield County? You're in Chester?
Yeah, Chesterfield.
What neighborhood might that be?
Near Woodlake.
Near Woodlake. So I wouldn't say Woodlake. Woodlake. If you could do anything to make Hillside Court better, what would you do? Don't do that. Because that's that 2-4, right? But you might say, Woodlake, if you could do anything to strengthen Chesterfield County, what would you do? And they might say, our schools. You know, start to try to find that passion place underneath there, but we just don't want to create that doing for dynamic. All right, so that's our homework 5. If you could do 5 listening conversations, that will really help inform our work the next time we get together. So when we're doing this asset mapping, one of the ways we do it, it's not the only way we do it, one of the ways we do it is to hire neighborhood youth to conduct these surveys. That's what the funding that the district got is to have 3 listening projects where young people would get a stipend. We generally do $10 per survey. Now they have to record them. They audio record them so that we can process the information we learn. Yes?
What about the child protection policy?
So they never go alone.
Just one.
Yeah, they never go alone, and each of your contexts are going to be different. So like the YMCA in Greenlee, anyone that goes out with the kids through the WISE program will have to go through the WISE volunteering program. You just met the volunteer coordinator. So she'll help shepherd that group through. In our schools, when we're doing school-based listening, we're working with a CIS worker, and they're doing it at lunch, but they had to get permission from the school to do it over their lunch. So every context is going to be different. Some of your programs may run during the day. Your feeding programs, if they run during the day, there may not be young people available. So it may be that you have a potential connector who would want to take it on, an adult that would conduct the surveys. It could be your church members if you're still discerning kind of what does my church feel called to. So this is a listening project, but young people are really fun to do this with, and it's a skill building and a vocational development tool. And I just wanted to show y'all what it looked like when Broadwater or Chester.
Every neighborhood transformation story has 3 kinds of heroes: the dreamers, the connectors, and the wise. This is the story of 5 young dreamers in a dream release of church. Our story begins here in the Broadwater neighborhood in the summer of 2015. A team from Chester United Methodist Church partnered with the neighborhood youth to discover the dreams of the residents through a Dreamcatcher project. Guided by Wendy McKagan and Brace Richmond, and having completed a church-wide mission shift training, this faithful team made a commitment to build upon the assets already present in the neighborhood. Some of our young dream catchers were attracted to the project by the offer of free food, but it was the idea of making the neighborhood a better place that ultimately kept them connected. When asked why they got involved, our key shared, "It's boring around here, and I like that I can make a positive change." Charnice said, "I like the fact that they actually wanted me to do it. They could have had anyone, but they wanted us to do it." Through interviews and community-wide conversations, the team discovered that what the neighbors cared most about were the children and providing positive activities for them. While adults wanted to make this dream a reality, the demands of family and work life kept many from getting involved. The team became discouraged. It appeared as though the neighborhood dreams would go unfulfilled. Then one of the youth asked a powerful question: "Why do we need the adults to lead the action teams? Why can't we do it ourselves?" That question changed everything. Each of our young leaders became the heroes they were looking for. Our key started a group for teens. I wanted a place for teens to come out and meet each other and talk about positive things. I wanted to see all teens succeed. Sam started a mentoring program. I like kids. I love seeing how happy they are. I want more teens to mentor kids and be positive role models. Aisha started a weekly science club. I love science. It's hands-on and it's exciting. I love seeing the little kids learn to love science. Charnice became the neighborhood organizer. I want everyone to know what is going on, so I developed a calendar and coordinate events to bring people together. While they were all fearful in the beginning that no one would come to their groups, their combined efforts are touching the lives of dozens of children and youth every week. Our young heroes will tell you that they could not have done all this without the love and support of Chester UMC. This church made a great commitment to the Great Commandment. By investing in these great neighbors, they are making the neighborhood great. Julie, the church missions chair, stated, mission shift training made me rethink missions. We're used to just giving out handouts. Asset-based community development is a different way to think about it. There was a little resistance. Changing the way that we've always done things is hard. Carolyn, who now mentors Taisha, stated, when you get that bug, you have to respond to God's call. I love missions. ABCD was another step in missions for our church that was not conventional. It was very different than simply giving a handout. Charnice stated, the church was that extra shield that you need, the motherly figure. Anytime you need something, they were there to help. Each of our young leaders discovered they had a unique gift to give. Our key is a great role model. Sam brings the gift of enthusiasm and laughter. Taisha discovered teaching gifts. And Charnice brings organizational skills. All of the youth will tell you that they have gained confidence and are more willing to talk to their neighbors. They all also discovered that they are in fact leaders. Our key shared, I'm good at motivating people to do that. Charnice said, I was always the person to help lead, but I've taken it further and have become. Audrey, a Chester UMC member who supports our young heroes, stated, I marvel at the growth and commitment of the young. They are teaching me to accept the role of being a follower and assist when asked or needed. In addition to the changes in the young leaders, there are signs of changes happening in the neighborhood. Our key shared, I see people talking, coming together. It's good to see the little kids coming to the clubhouse and laughing. One by one, great neighbors of all ages are catching the vision. 16-year-old Cece has launched a dance team for kids. Cece's mother, Morgan, and Frederick are 3 adults from the neighborhood who are volunteering to support the young leaders. Our young heroes are still dreaming. Charnice shared, I want the next generation to be able to do what we are doing. It's fun, it gives you something to do, and it brings people together. I want to see all of the dreams of the neighbors come true. Reverend Sylvia Meadows shared, this process is helping our church to see what a wealth of gifts there are in the neighborhood. Every bit of this experience far exceeded what we expected. God blessed us beyond anything that we ever imagined. And Audrey affirmed, saying, more church members appreciate the gifts, knowledge, and abilities of Broadwater residents and any persons whom we seek to assist. Listening is our greatest contribution. Julie Ferry has this advice for other churches. Definitely do the mission shift training. Just know the assets are there. I really did not expect it, and daggone it if God didn't put the right people there. It was awesome. You just have to trust.
We're Broadwater United, proving that young people can change the world.
Have insurance from the seminary.
Actually,
Nice.
So the place God calls you to is a place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Your church has a unique calling. Communities have a deep desire, and communities have giftedness. Where those intersect is where God is calling us, and where we should engage. So it's another focused conversation, looking at the video, listening to the statements.
Before we do our kind of closing conversation, I'd like y'all to get their pairs and take 5 minutes, have one person be the interviewer and one person be the interviewee, and take this form, this one right here, and practice this. So one person, then don't role play, okay? So be you, and when they ask the question, you can change anything about your neighborhood, what would you change? Think about your neighborhood. Don't try to pretend like you're something else, right? So we'll take about 5-10 minutes to have take this experience. get through the first 5 days and practice that. So those of you that were doing the interview, what was that process like for you?
Exciting.
Exciting? Say more.
Well, I didn't know much about this ministry, and I didn't know he even lived in Petersburg, so I'm glad to know he's a fellow Petersburg resident.
Wonderful.
And he lives in historic Petersburg, which is totally different from my neighborhood.
So it's exciting because you're meeting someone, you have something in common.
That known for several years, but didn't know he lived in Petersburg.
Oh, that's wonderful. So finding people who have shared identity. Anyone else that was an interviewer?
It was just nice to get to know Lena a little bit more. She's doing her job, I'm doing my job, so.
Yeah, so it's good for relationship building.
It's kind of fun to get to know Rachel a little bit and know what she's about.
Yeah. So the questions are so open-ended that people, you do get a feel for what the person really cares about and how they answered. So those of you that were being interviewed, how was that for you? What was that experience like for you?
I mean, really, we have to think. I mean, I've been living in my neighborhood for 3 years, but I live on the edge of it. Like, I live across the street from the field. And so trying to, like, get connected, one of the things I learned about connectedness with my neighbors, because I know the ones that are my parishioners, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And, you know,
So it's questions that you often aren't asked.
Yeah.
I'll often have people say, nobody's ever asked me that before.
Yeah, what's my favorite memory? What do I like best about the neighborhood? Like, there's not a lot of fast traffic, so I can walk because there's no sidewalks. Like, that was kind of where I went with it.
So it gets you start to think about assets, right? I've never thought about that, but I don't get hit by a car. That's an asset. Yeah.
Bonus.
Others that were interviewed, what was that like?
I'm kind of like Rachel, it makes you think. You know, you don't really think about things, and you also think about the strengths of the neighborhood. And I don't look so much at the faults, if you will. I know where I am 70 years since I'm not in the movie.
Yeah.
Right, we're gonna jump to that. But just the, also, it brought a little bit of sadness because most of my people on the road that I live are not charged. And that's the sad, that makes me, I didn't really think about it, about the tags, you don't really think about it, on Sunday morning. And to me, that was kind of an epiphany, when I need to do more.
Yeah, it gets you thinking about place and geography.
Right.
And oftentimes we're such a commuter society, we don't even think about the places that we're in and the strengths that are there.
Right.
So was it hard for either side, for interviewer or interviewee? It's a very non-threatening. Often people are being interviewed. So, do you receive TANF? Do you receive this, benefit? Do you receive? It's non-invasive. People are kind of accustomed to people when they're coming to do a needs assessment. They're asking very personal kinds of things. This is not. This is, so a lot of times people are like, we don't want to talk about, but this is asset mapping, and needs assessments are completely different. That third question is incredibly important, how you phrase this. So if you could do anything, what would you do? I've had groups take this, and they're so used to needs assessments, they'll say, if our church could do anything to help you, what should we do? You just screwed up the whole thing. I mean, now they're thinking you're coming to do for it. So be super, super careful when you're training people on how to use this tool, that they don't flip it into a needs assessment. Okay? So I want us to conclude our time thinking about our next faithful step. So this is session 2. Our goal today was that you would understand what a listening project would look like. What we've discerned today is that a number of you guys are not to the place of doing a listening project in a community quite yet. So I want to try to figure out where is the room. So from what I've seen so far, Karen is probably, if we were looking at a readiness scale, like 9, you know, have some names there that you can talk to, participants that can potentially introduce, knows the neighborhood, has a building place. So she's out here. Anyone else have that much clarity that you have a neighborhood and you have an opportunity and you have a few names of neighbors? So next faithful step for Karen. Yes, ma'am.
So we don't like have a neighborhood, but we're still like doing our. So just like kind of seeing this interview survey and to focus on maybe like needs in school or in their personal communities, and maybe just like, you know, just kind of taking it.
So the kids that are in the rest stop, are they unhoused?
Some of them are, but some of them live in our community.
Okay. So if you ask the students, if you could do anything to strengthen first of all, find out geographically where they live. And let's say that y'all wanted to, it was in the immediate area. And ask that question, yeah, that's where you would start. Yeah, so they could be your assets. Also, Greenlee, anyone interested in working the Chester area, they're about to start this process in partnering with like a YMCA. Now, those of you who have, so this table has geography, Petersburg, huge geography. So
we're not going to do it all.
No, you got to bite a little bitty piece off. The next faithful step for this group is to really think about your starting place. What was interesting to me at this table, we have an educator, we have an educator, we have an educator, heart for education and self-development, already connecting or have a heartbeat for youth, correct? As you guys think about the assets that are already at this table, that feels like that education piece, and maybe thinking about what is there in elementary school that you might build a relationship with to start to understand the complexities of if you can get it down from, you know, don't do the high school because that's what we all do, but get it down to maybe an elementary and then drill down even further once you have that. That would be my suggestion in the next faithful step. Did y'all feel like as a group and a passion for Petersburg that this group is coalescing around this project, interested in supporting this discernment? You're not committing to doing anything, just supporting the discernment around Petersburg?
I think we've all identified. We can sit back and identify a bunch of needs, and that's not going to work. But we see, one of the things we talked about is there used to be a homeless shelter for men for evenings in Petersburg. It's gone. Those men have no place to go now. And so we're seeing the homeless on the street. We're seeing them on the porches of the churches. And so we see a need, so we don't know what the solution is, but we need to talk to people.
So don't look for the need, look for the community. So what you've identified is the unsheltered homeless population as a potential, and they're in a particular geography around Petersburg, largely in your kind of downtown. So a listening project for you guys might look like that 5-question survey used with individuals who are in that situation. If you could do anything to make, to increase access to homes, to homes, or to strengthen community among individuals experiencing homelessness, however we have to wordsmith it. I started out working with individuals experiencing homelessness. My friend Rudy Green could be a good asset to you because Rudy would feel very comfortable. He's trained in this, and he's helped me in many neighborhoods. So if you wanted to focus on the unsheltered population, that would be a potential to get to know. It will be very difficult if the demographic that you're reaching out to has no affinity to you. So if there's a racial barrier, age barrier, it's going to be really hard to get honest answers. But finding someone like my friend Rudy, he spent 30 years on the streets of Richmond, who can come in and have
Alan Sanford too.
Yeah, someone who has actually he has a relationship with some of the names and stuff already with work stuff. That's great. So find an asset, because I think it would be very difficult, the gap between
where you are and where our friends are. But they're great assets among the folks that are on the streets. You're gonna have to find those streets. And recovery ministries. So most of my assets when I was working in homeless services, the Healing Place is one of the strongest recovery programs in Richmond. I hired 20 guys out of the Healing Place 1 year, and I got to know them, and they were one of the strongest assets. So your assets are not gonna be the folks who are still in active addiction. It's gonna be someone who's on the other side who can reach out. So that's very cool. So there's a couple of different threads, but your next faithful step to pray and to be together and to share ideas together, is that a good next faithful step for this group? This group, partnering well. Next faithful step. So y'all are all different places. I'm going to come back because I didn't finish everybody over here either, but tell me what you feel like your next faithful step.
Give my contribution.
Okay, congregation's not there yet. So readiness scale, they're at a 4. Okay, that's good.
I mean, education is key.
So educating the congregation, or?
Right, get the four churches together.
Yeah, okay.
So
So congregational readiness,
Yeah.
congregational readiness, we talked about where you guys are, congregational
Same
readiness.
thing, I think, just getting people prayerful about what we can do to help our community.
Yeah, okay, so one thing that Audrey and I and Andrew will be thinking about is tools for congregational readiness, that video, just different resources we have available to congregational readiness.
I think your prayer and talking maybe to people on the missions committee about how we can start shifting in this direction.
Yeah. Very good. Next table step?
Church.
Oh, okay, so y'all are on your way to this church. Okay, I did not realize that. Sorry.
That's the world.
One thing that we talked about briefly is congregations that are more seasoned. A lot of our seasoned friends have a lot of wisdom and are spiritually your powerhouses. So as you're thinking about next faithful step and you're putting together the prayer team, remember that was the first thing, praying the Lord, discern and pray. We need to pray about our discernment, that we're discerning well, and that it is truly spirit inspired. So next faithful step for this group, I'm hearing pray, so to hear where God is calling you, and then God would reveal those potential partners that can open doors for you. And that congregate any tools that we can come up with, Andrew can send out links to videos and other ideas. All right, so we talked about this group. They're like so ready. They're going to come back. We're going to map everything. We're going to follow along. Emporia, next faithful step.
I think my big thing is to do some sitting down with my parishioners who want to be doing more in the community and say, what are your passions?
Yeah.
You know, asking these questions about if you could make a change in Emporia, what would it be?
Yeah. Yeah, because if your congregants live in the same general community, you're going to get some passion feel for what the neighborhood would say.
I think we're ready to interview some people in the church and grab about 20 people who did the meal and ask them to do this survey with them. Number one. Then the second thing is because we have some regular customers that are neighbors who come to our meals, to interview them as well, and just to see what the results are. Maybe not even go anywhere with it, but just to see what it is. What's your passion? What you got? be.
Yeah, it's just a learning
Just
process.
figure, hey, we're gonna do this crazy thing, and then I have one other thing the Lord told me to do, and that's to put a grateful for that. And so there'll be sticky notes on all the tables this month, and I'll say, write one thing that you're grateful for, and we'll have an empty bulletin board for people to put sticky notes on.
Yeah, I love that shift to abundance. I mean, it's another way of thinking, look how abundant,
So when
how
you're
blessed.
grateful for, one thing you're grateful for, you can put 2 sticky notes if you want, but I'm gonna fill up the board and leave that up for the month till the next meal.
And so it sounds like you guys are both to the point where you can actually talk
Let's just ask the
to
questions.
participants.
So at least I'm gonna ask some of our participants, but I will ask the 20 people that volunteered to do the meal.
Yeah.
That same strength survey.
Wonderful,
That's
wonderful. And I think that you guys, I know, pastors not here need to get involved in that
We need to
ministry.
learn more
And
about what he knows and about what everybody else knows.
Wonderful.
Get to know some people.
yeah,
Some
and
people work
so you have an entry point, just don't have the names yet. But so this worked out. I mean, the groups that you're currently in, is this because you're kind of in similar places of discernment, kind of starting here next time, and we might shuffle y'all around again? Y'all like musical chairs? You get to know? Is that good? So it really,
Also Baptist pastors we use for the
yeah. Yeah, like Karen told me. Karen said, you've been there how long? 12 years now. Oh, that's rare. So if y'all will take out your training evaluations, if y'all can complete those. If you can complete your training evaluations and give them to Andrew, we'd really appreciate it. And we'll be back on May 8th. Thank you all. Can I pray for y'all real quick?
Before she closes us, Tish, are there things that we can help you do so that you're not here a long time after we leave? I am collecting your name tags because I recycle and use them. But please, when you bring them up to me, I have a CEU certificate from pastors who use them. And let's thank Tish for setting
So Audrey said God gave her a prayer this morning. She wrote down for us. I'd like to invite everybody to stand, and I'd like us just to hold hands, because we're all part of a community.
I just got done saying that, Rachel.
I'll pray in my school teacher's voice. Lord, you are calling us to a place, to a community of people whom you will choose for us to serve. You send us out to every place and every town. We ask the Lord of the harvest to send laborers. We ask that we bring peace into every place where we are called. We pray that our peace will rest on the persons of peace who reside in towns, villages, cities, communities, and schools. Give us the persons of peace. Give us the place. Give us ears to hear, and by hearing, understand that you, the Lord of the harvest, are Lord of the laborers, are Lord of all. Lord, we abide in you, and in that abiding, we ask and know you will answer this prayer. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen.
And let's thank Andrew for setting all this up.